Joseph Parish Rectory. And this is a very special moment for me. I'm currently the pastor of St. Joseph Parish. And next year we're going to be celebrating our 100th anniversary. And of course this anniversary will be rich with history. And we got some very special people with us today who are going to share those historic moments with us. And I find that very exciting because I find this a very exciting parish to be a pastor of. And so we've got former pastors, we've got a priest with us, who's a former Dedhamite, and just lots of special guests here. And we're just going to share all of these enriching stories, and I'm really excited about it. So welcome.
I'd like to have everybody introduce themselves, and would the priest like to introduce yourselves first? Father?
I'm Mr.
And where are you presently?
Well, I was born here.
You were born?
I stayed here till the second grade, and my folks moved back here when I was in the seminary, and I said my first mass here.
And of course, we know
Father Henry Meyer. I was born in, about 2 miles south of here. And my mother Anna and my father Theodore Meyer. And I went to school here, grade school. And then I went to Conception for high school and college. Got my college degree at Conception, and then I went on to the seminary in St. Louis. Then
what he thought was the reason why he was always just so at that time when he talked to people. And when people came to the door, the first thing he asked was this a friendly visit or is it a visit that you're going to complain?
I should start asking.
And so he would say, if it's a friendly visit, come on in. But if it was the other way, his foot never went out of the door. If the door went shut.
No.
I was born at the Centennial area, 3.5 miles out in the country. And we were a family of 10. We attended St. Joseph School here. We had all of our elementary education here. Up to the 10th grade, Father Henry was one of my good classmates. And because my family, well, we had enough to eat. We had roof over heads, clothes to wear, but we didn't have the money to spend for further education. So I was able to get work as a clerk in a general merchandise store, and I worked there 3 years. But I wanted to go into nursing, and I had to finish my high school in order to get in. So I was able to get into Mount St. Clair Academy at Centennial, and that was through Sister Katrina. She is a member of the Sisters of Perpetual Adoration, but she knew that we could work for our women board there and then still get our education too. So that is what I did. And these same sisters who were Franciscans, Black Franciscans, they had a school for nursing at Mercy Hospital in Burlington. So that is where I went. And after I completed my time for the diploma program, I was able to work there, and I stayed there 14 years. And at that time, then the war broke out, and there were more demands for nurses to get further education. Yeah, although I was considered essential there at the hospital, so I didn't go into the Army or the service. But when they encouraged us to get further education, then I went to Washington, D.C. to go to Catholic University. And I had read about Sister Olivia, who was a Benedictine sister from Winona in Minnesota. She was the director of the nursing program in Washington. So I completed my time there for a bachelor's of nursing education and also my master's in able to work part-time, which helped me to have enough money to pay for my tuition and my other needs. And I had opportunities to work out there, which I did, and was very informative and very fulfilling to be in the nursing profession. So I stayed there until it was time to retire. And,
So we got good
You know, and
pupils out of our,
what is it?
we got a good student out from our school them days too.
Yes. Well, I found
Being-
it very
being in-
fulfilling. Nursing was very rewarding too. Now I'm back in, at Orchardville.
Okay, Gertrude, would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, I am Gertrude Kit. I used to be Gertrude Mattis in this parish also. And I've lived here most of my life. I went to school here. And I raised my family. I came back here to Dedham. We lived in Audubon for a while and I came back here. And the children all went to the school here. And they are all married and gone now, so my husband died in '64, so I've been alone quite some time now, but then so far I've managed, and I have a family of 17 grandchildren and 10 great-grandchildren, so I guess I've got a fairly good-sized family, but then it seems as though they don't come as often as what I'd like them to. But then that's about the most of it.
Sparky?
I'm C.J. Sparky Rossmeyer. I was born in Dedham in 1912. And after the war, my folks moved down to eastern Iowa, Militia County. And I was there up in Sparta, Wisconsin for 2 years. Come back down east, 32, spring of 32, we come to Carroll. And I've been around here ever since. I was here when they moved the old church away out here, started this new one, which was quite a sight to see moved. And I rebuilt part of the school for more classrooms. I don't remember what year that was. But that year, we had 211 children just for Dedham alone, our Catholic school.
They had a year of high school, and then they'd have, as they went to summer school, then they would go to the next grades. So I had Sister Stina 5 out of 8 years. And then in the 3rd grade, I was in the Northwest school downstairs. And then the 4th grade, I was upstairs in the Northwest room. And the 5th grade and the 6th and 7th grade, I was downstairs again in the Northwest room. And then the 8th grade was in the Northeast. And during that time, they wonder when that furnace blew, in order to make that foundation the way it was. And that happened in 1928, when I was in the 7th grade in school. And I wasn't here at the time because we were invited to a wedding at Roselle. But then they told us about it the next day.
You mean the furnace blew in the school?
In the school, I
Yeah,
think.
I've never heard that.
Oh, yeah, that's,
And the mop boards away from the wall went a couple of inches. And then if you look from the outside on the west side, it's the foundation. And that has lasted all these years. And then when they came around to inspect school here about, maybe 10 years ago.
6 years.
Then they said it was condemned because it couldn't use it anymore. And we said, well, we should have all been dead by now. And then during that time, while they were here, the old furnaces, before they got the oil, the sisters would take, and one of the boys in school would take out the ashes at noon, every noon. They would do there, and one boy would come over here and help Mary me down, take the ashes out of the furnace here in the house. And this window is in this little bathroom, that was a little porch out here. and that was remodeled with about a pig cave back then.
Well, was that cave, there when the house was built?
The cave was there when the house was built, and was still there until just not too many years.
Yeah, there's still a.
Well, the cave is still there,
Yes,
Yeah,
it's
it's
still
still
there,
there.
yeah.
Once the garage was built, when, like,
By Bilzers,
yeah, they were built later, the garages
as
and
it attached to it,
Yeah.
it was attached to it.
because Jim Uxman did that, I remember that. Jim Uxman.
Well, why don't we finish introducing everybody and then we'll get into more of our stories then, and then we can really get into it as you, okay.
I'll assume I did.
And this was Clara Meyer, because I think you forgot to introduce yourself.
I'm Alice Earl Beck, born 1907, southwest of town here, about 4 miles, 4 or 5. My dad was Joe and mother was Bernadina. And I started school in 1913, I believe it was, 14. And I went to school all 7 or 8 years I went. Graduated here from school. In wintertime, when the roads were bad, well, we boarded at the nuns for 2 months, and it was exam in January, and February. And graduated here and finished the 8th grade. After that, I went home and worked at home until I got married in 1939. Dorothy, my wife, she's from William. We've been married 52 years. That's all I got to say.
Well, you've
Still
actually
here.
lived here all your life then.
Yeah, I lived
You
all
was
my life.
born and raised here, yes, lived here all. Okay. Ambrose?
I'm Ambrose Earlbeck. I was born about the same place he was. I was a country boy, drove a horse and buggy to school, took my education here at the school, but I was lucky enough to get 2 years of high school in. A kindly old nun by the name of Sister Leonella volunteered to come back and teach me something. She thought I wasn't ready to go out in the world yet. But after 10 years, why, seemed like I wanted to stay on the farm, but wasn't without a little persuasion from Father Meyer to go to Conception, finish high school down there. But I think the plow won out, so I stayed on the farm.
I'm Linda Tuning, and I just tried to help get a little story here for all of our good folks around the area. And, Beth?
I'm Beth Clucky. I've been helping her with it.
What we'd like to do right now is, we have a little write-up. First, we're going to just read a little bit before we go into more of our discussion. Beth?
Okay, the people of St. Joseph's Parish were almost without exception German and held a high regard for their religion, and they decided to build a church. The first Catholic church in Dedham was erected in 1892. It was a small structure, 40 by 24 and 16 feet high. When the church became too small for this number of parishioners, a new church was built in 1902. The church was built for a sum of $5,000. While under construction, this building was struck by lightning and considerable damage was done. In 1905, Father Dries became our first permanent pastor and built our present rectory in 1906. In 1939, Father Hillsource was pastor and erected the present church at a cost of $55,000. Catholic education has also been an important part of our community, dating back to 1894 when the first school was opened. After the second church was completed in 1903, the old building was occupied as a school. A parish meeting was held in the fall of 1912. It was decided to build a new parochial school. This building was to be 70 by 48 brick structure to include a basement, 2 stories with storms, sashes, and screens at a total cost of $13,943. In September 1913, the Franciscan Sisters of St. Rose Convent arrived to teach at St. Joseph's. Through all the years, 8th grades were taught in Dedham until 1968. At that time, St. Joseph's of Dedham and St. Mary's of Willie consolidated to become Dedham Willie School. In the fall of 1990, the Dedham Willie students began the school year at Holy Spirit School in Carroll. Upon completion of 8th grade, the students complete their education at Kemper Catholic High School, which was formed in 1954.
Thank you, Beth. Father Kester, you had something there you wanted to share with us too?
Yeah, put
Maybe?
something on tape or personnel, but
Here, this one. Is there one there,
Yeah,
Sparky?
mhm.
Okay,
I don't know if it'll help any.
okay.
And it has historic license of the earliest church in Wyoming. As a young child, I remember the church itself as an old wooden frame structure, seated on the very site of the present day church. As a youngster in first and second grade, it seemed like it was very dark heading inside. And I think one of the things that I recall more than anything else, how cold it was in the wintertime. The church itself had one of the earliest oil furnaces in the area. It burned a real heavy, dark oil, and this brought in a cargo of lots stored in a reservoir up on top of the hill to the east of the church, and then piped down to the furnace itself. Father Cordis, who was the St. Lawrence and Carroll, was one of the early promoters of these oil furnaces, and I assume that is where Father Hillsource got the idea of heating the church, for the church before the oil was very cheap in those days. One of the things I recall also are the hitching rails for the horses that were along, particularly on the rectory side of the street. The hitching rails were made of posts and a heavy log chain stretching from post to post. And those people who came to church would hitch their horses in their rigs and leave them there during church time. I recall in the wintertime how some who were very considerate of their horses would cover them with a blanket, others just let them stand, and some hoard their supplies of cold. I'm not real sure about the hitching rail on the east side of the street. However, I do recall the one that was on the left side. My early memories of the church itself included the idea of seeing Father Hillshorst at his pray-dieu with his beretta on and saying prayers. Somehow or the other, this was very impressive because this was his preparation before Mass. And I also recall that after Mass, he would kneel at the same pray-dieu in order to make his Thanksgiving after Mass. I recall the pulpit, seeing it as it was very high. You looked down upon the heads of all of those who were in the church. And I recall the announcements were made both in English and in German. The gospel and the epistle were read in both languages, and the sermons more often than not were in German. And they certainly escaped the minds of a first or second grader. But after all, he wasn't talking to them in a way. No one received Holy Communion at the 10 o'clock high Mass. This Mass seemed interminable, and somehow or the other associate that with being very, very tired of going to church and not being too enthusiastic, because after the long Mass itself, there was benediction of the Most Blessed Sacrament. For myself, I had had 1 year of schooling in a public school when I came to St. Joseph. However, because I didn't have any German, I had to repeat the first grade. And the first grade was necessary to learn German, to read it and write it, and also to study the catechism, which was the old Dedham's catechism in German. It had German on one side and English on Joe Schrader, who had heavy earth-moving equipment at that time, dug the basement deeper than it should have been dug. And that is why there's the footing that is in the basement of the church seems to extend several feet above the surface. The church itself was built during the summertime, and my recollection of it was that when the time came for pouring the floor, they needed lots of help. I recall we started at daylight in the morning, and there were 2 cement mixers out in the front of the church on the east end. There were men who were manning the mixers, and there were also those who were running wheelbarrows, and we poured the floor of the church itself. Underneath the floor there were pans that were used, and these pans were supported by hundreds of 2x4s and stays underneath in the basement. And each one of these pans was a concave formation, so that there was a real truss every couple of feet in the basement itself. And I recall one of the men who was working at that time made the boast that after that cement was dry, you would be able to run like locomotive over the floor and not even dent it. The entire floor had to be poured in one operation, so we began early in the morning and it continued late at night. And my job at that time was to run the vibrator, which would settle the concrete down into the crevices. If you saw the bottom of the pan for the basement side, you will notice that there are areas where there are many more rocks in appearance than other places. This indicates that the vibrator was run too long in one spot, and the rocks settled down into that area. When the church was completed, the problem of putting in pews was confronted by the parish itself. The pews from the old church were being used, and with the cement floor, the question came up of how to fasten the pews. We didn't have the cement drills that we have at the present time, and to put screws into the cement would have been a long, tedious, really hard work operation. So Joe Auberman, the local blacksmith, came up with the idea that, I know this is even being used today, of those convex irons that somehow or the other join the pews on each end. And I see that you've continued that construction even to this time.
And now we'll follow up with, maybe we can talk about what we remember mostly about the church now in this session. And does anybody have any recollection of their parents telling them anything about the first or the second church that was built here? Any of you remember anything about, did your parents talk at home on anything about our first and second church or anything that you can remember? Well, then we'll go on to, okay, you don't remember nothing? Okay, well, that's fine. We'll go on to then the church that we presently have now, and we'll just start talking about it, which it was interesting for me to hear the story about that they dug it too deep because it was, now we just got done painting it 2 years ago, and that's why they got happy with their digging.
Hey, the old church,
Yeah.
that's the second church, I believe. And when it got very windy, the church would move, from the wind. And then I recall also, my dad said the litany on Sunday.
Oh, yeah, and then
No, that,
when
you
you,
know,
For
the
good
Sacred
cause.
Heart.
For good
It
cause.
was
What?
Our Lady of Perpetual Help, Father, wasn't it?
I don't know,
Uh,
which,
The holy name of Jesus for during the summertime.
Could I
And-
interject something there? We
okay,
as kids called his dad Bounty Hunter because
And Barbara DeHunza.
the first intonation for the litany was Herr Bounty Hunter.
Yes,
really,
and Dan had a deep voice.
oh, yeah.
So they called him Bounty Hunter.
Well, this was interesting to me, was where you, well, see, naturally, they said it was German, very much German here when it was started. And then they had both in English and German when they read the Mass and so forth. That was interesting to me.
In school, we had German in the morning and in English in the afternoon.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah, you had to speak German in the morning. In the afternoon, you could speak English.
And in the 5th grade, then the government says we couldn't do it anymore. We couldn't teach it. Like 5th grade, the 5th grade, you're German reading.
Early Mass, I think, had the English sermon, and the High Mass, late Mass, why, I think they preached in German.
And Father Hilsnars gave rather lengthy sermons. I remember telling my dad that he puts you to sleep because he's always saying the same thing. And Dad said, well, if you listen, you know, he's giving you a message, and it sort of changed my attitude about his sermons because I listened after that rather than having this complaint idea in my mind, you know, he's talking too long. But it changed the attitude entirely.
Okay, Margaret, you had something?
well, I was gonna say, when I started school, I couldn't talk English.
Uh-huh.
All I knew was German.
Yeah.
We had Low German at home, and then when we came here, we had High German. It was called Fundage.
What's Low German and what's High German? I
It's
didn't very.
a nationality that